Welcome to What a Word is Worth, a space for creative minds to speak about viable ways to heal the world through writing and other inventive mediums. This is your host, Marianela Medrano, founder of Palabra Training Center, where we give words out as medicine. My guest today is someone from whom I learned to give out words as medicine, John Fox. He has gifted the world with viable means to reclaim one of the basic human rights, creativity. He is the founder of the Institute for Poetic Medicine, and his book, one of his books, Finding What You Didn't Lose, certainly changed my worldview back when I read it in the 90s. We know a good book when it passes the test of time, and Finding What You Didn't Lose remains fresh and relevant. And that's so, to me, that's invaluable. So thank you, John, for joining me in conversation today. Welcome.
Marianela, thank you so much for a very generous introduction, and I feel honored and blessed to be talking with you.
Mm-hmm.
We've known each other for a while through this work of poetry therapy and writing to heal, and so thank you for this invitation to speak with you.
Yes, no. I always start the conversation asking people how they came to the encounter of poetry or how poetry found them. And also, I usually ask people if they subscribe to the idea that poetry is a healing balm, but I don't have to ask you that because you embody that. But tell us, what was your first encounter with poetry and that realization that this can heal me if there was anything to heal?
Yeah, it's sort of an unfolding process. So I'll say just at first, I fell in love with writing when I was in second grade. I remember I had a second grade teacher, Miss Watkins, who would take, this is like about 1962, she'd take the back page of Life magazine and put it on a piece of cardboard. And the back page of Life magazine at that time was called Miscellany. And it was always an unusual, sometimes odd photograph. And so she'd put it on the piano bench and lean it against the piano and say, let's write a story. And, when I think back then, what I had was my light green piece of paper with dark green lines. And I was, of course, learning to write in cursive. And I had a purple pencil, with a lead pencil. But Marianela, I just loved, to make stories up. I remember I made up a story about a baseball player who played second base, and his name was Davey Monahan, and which is a good name for a second baseman, I think. And and my mother drew, she was an artist, so she drew, drawings for it. And so that was, when I was quite young. And then, and I don't know what sparked this, but the first poem I remember writing, I was maybe 12 or 13. So I was just entering into adolescence. And I was at a place called Thornton Park, and it was a skating rink. And I was watching a girl skate. For me, I was watching this girl skate in a little chocolate brown skating outfit. And I remember the poem, I don't have that poem, but in a notebook. And even back then, I feel I wanted people to see I was seeing a skater.
Mm.
And, so that, and I loved the idea of trying to come up with words that could express this. And
Yeah.
somehow that took root in my being and life. And so I fell in love with writing, well, when I was a child, but with poetry then.
Mm-hmm.
So that was me. There's lots of things you could say. Well, I was 12 or 13. I was watching this girl, I was thinking that's beautiful, watching her skate. And but the healing part came because I also in my life, from when I was a child, grew up with a right leg that had significant difficulties. And I ended up having numerous surgeries on that leg. And so I was in the hospital quite frequently. And writing became a way of giving voice to that experience and provided some insight into what it meant and for me, and also was a way to put it on the page. So very early on, I began to get the sense that writing was important to talk about things that were hard to talk about in normal conversation. So those may be the 2 or 3 sort of steps that I can share with you.
What I appreciate about what you're saying is that the element of curiosity seems to be threaded through this, be that like, how do I translate what I'm watching to those who read me, and then how do I translate this pain into something I can digest, I guess, metabolize.
Yeah, and find some support in the midst of, that's the pain and sort of, the sort of the unknown of having a leg that would give me such problems.
Right.
The curiosity, I love that sense of curiosity of being able to feel that there was something there to say. I mean, like, to not see the blank page or the blank notebook as as something foreboding or like difficult, but actually an invitation to curiosity.
Yeah. And so I experienced that through, of course, reading your work, but also taking workshops with you. Tell us more about the Institute for Poetic Medicine. How was it born, and how did you get to that focus on nurturing connections, which, connections, that's such a vital element, creating community and holding a paradigm that goes beyond the human. Right? What is human to include everything that exists? Because I think that's what I gather in previous conversations with you, but also when I look at your website, that this is a very wide scope here. So tell us, how did you come to form the Institute for Poetic Medicine?
Well, again, it's kind of a process. I was had been involved. Well, let me take a few steps back. I always feel like, just in my nature, I sort of have a the vision of like that there's a lot to be include, and my sort of where I lean is to be inclusive, and I would say that was true, perhaps manifesting in my teenage years, and then but I was part of an organization for many years that I was dedicated to, that did was for poetry therapy. And as part of that, this is a particular thing that happened. Oh, sorry, Mariana, I'll turn that off. I was I wrote a grant to an organization called the Lloyd Simonton Foundation. This was in the early 2000s.
Mm.
They were granting people funds for working with cancer patients.
Mm.
So in the course of my career, it had a lot of contact with organizations dealt with supporting people living with, coming through or dying from cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that grant, I put that in a foundation because it had to go to a nonprofit. And I began to think to myself, and it was a substantial grant. So I began to think to myself, well, I can put it in this other foundation that is not something I'm associated with exactly, but that's okay. But what if I were to create a foundation,
Mm-hmm.
an institute, a nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
that could accept grants, could accept funds, and then I could have some real input on what that would mean. So
Mm-hmm.
in the mid 2003, 4, 5, in 2005, the Institute for Poetic Medicine was founded as a nonprofit 501c3. And since that time, we've received grants and funds from individuals, from some foundations that have allowed the Institute to fund what I call poetry partner projects. So there's a gentleman named Wayne Gilbert who we funded for 4 years working at a maximum security prison in Sterling, Colorado.
Wow.
Or, there's a woman we funded for 11 years, Myrna Ann Hecht, working with immigrant and refugee youth.
Yeah.
Who were part of a high school in Tukwila, Washington. And so it was a great joy to me, and I truly mean this, a great joy to me to be able to sort of, and over the course of my life, met people who I feel would be appropriate for doing this kind of work. So, and in the midst of that, we also started a training program, and we've expanded out to do other kinds of poetry and healing programs.
So wonderful. So wonderful. And you know what I'm thinking, though, going back to what I said before, that, your work, your books, not only Finding What You Didn't Lose, but that one in particular, to me, the reason for why it has kind of remained fresh is that ability that you have. It's like you have a polyocular view, right? It's like it just includes so much, the inclusivity stance that you take. And I'll give you examples from your book, including writers from different walks of life and ethnicities. Maya Angelou, Audre Lorde, other indigenous voices, Mother Teresa, just to name a few of the so many you included in that book. And at a time where others were oblivious and dismissive of voices other than white Anglo voices, right? And male voices. You had the vision to do that. So, in the Latinx world, we work with this idea of pluriverses, right? Like we live in a pluriversal world, not a universal world. And I think you have that. Like you have. So my question is, how did young John Fox arrive to this awareness against all odds, right? Like you were the product of an American education that is not particularly very inclusive.
Right.
So tell me, what touched John Fox?
So I've just learned from you the pluriversal,
Okay.
and so I feel like there's something in me, and I think it's been, there for a long time, is where I feel like being open, open to what I can learn is, helps me to have that more inclusive, and it's really more than that, Marianela. It's
Yeah,
like,
it is.
if these voices are missing, then something's missing, and I think I realize that. So, but what I can say, and I feel this is be a good response to your question, two things. Finding what you didn't lose really has its deepest roots. And I appreciate my Angela. I mean, she actually begins the book,
Yes.
but it was my relationship and connection with children and creativity. And if you look at that book, there's all kinds of poems by children.
Yeah.
And I feel that there's the freshness. There's
Yes.
the not the other things aren't fresh, but their way of seeing their lives and life itself. And I'm not wanting to paint a sort of rosy picture, because children can also hurt and be, have some very hard things to say. I'm working with a wonderful hospice of the North Coast, north of San Diego. We're working on a program to bring poetry to children and teens dealing with grief. But so that's an important part. And the other part is, like, in my second book, Poetic Medicine, the first chapter, the first poem, let's see, Mason Finding What You Didn't Lose, sorry, is by a Dene or Navajo poet. And so part of my understanding of poetry as healer is that, I could give you chapter and verse of its sort of clinical beginnings in the United States, but it's really the indigenous people who understood this from way before it was ever, turned into a therapeutic field.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be, misappropriate what doesn't belong to me, but I realized that I wanted to start that book with a poem by a native person as a way of honoring that this is a ancient art. And so
that's the beauty of your work. That's what I'm saying, that you had the vision to start by giving back, because that's what you're doing. You're giving back, a place that belong. I mean, displacement is the history of this country. Misplacement, displacement, you name it, right? So you start the book like that. Your book is really sprinkled with so many different perspectives. So you knew then the art of taking perspectives on other perspectives, which is not appropriation. It's honoring.
Okay, I feel that's true, but I just want to be clear that that's my intention, not, to think, well, I'm going to, act like I can, be a native person.
Yeah, that doesn't come across. That's why I respect your work so much, because when I look back and I have studied in depth the indigenous people where I come from, which are the Tainos, and in the Taino tradition, we had what is called areitos, and that was basically singing, chanting verses, poetry, to celebrate just anything in life. If someone died, there was an areito. If there was a marriage, there was an areito. So I know that that's the reality, and that what we are doing today, it comes from that. That's the source. And you do it so well that you recognize that. And I thank you for that. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you.
Well, it's a blessing and an affirmation to hear you see that, affirm that, and I hope that I remain open. For the, I mean, I've seems to have found my way this far. I think also, not I think, I know that working with people who are dying, who are at the edge of what we know in this physical life, and hearing from their hearts, what their hearts have to say about that, certainly makes me aware of that there's so much that I don't know. And that is common to all of us. So maybe that's also part. There's the chapter in my second book in the middle of it, and I'm using this word, and it may be not either for comfortable for some people, but and this also talks about this larger picture that I feel. So the middle chapter in Poetic Medicine is when God sighs, and that sense that even what we consider most spiritual or divine or holy, actually in meeting the human condition, sigh is that sense of sighing. And so maybe that's also a way I remind myself to that I want to be open to what I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And going back again to what you were saying, that you want to stay clear of appropriating anybody's work.
Yeah.
The recognition of your sources, which I think you do, even now with this example that is so important, because appropriation is a disguised form of colonizing people.
Oh boy!
Right?
Oh, ouch!
So we have to be careful, right? And which you are. Even now, you are so cognizant. Before you were gonna say God,
yeah,
you were aware of that, right? And you want to be careful, even how you invoke the name God.
Marianela, I love that word you used, because it made me think of, I have a dear Danae friend, Navajo friend, Danae, and she would sing songs about washing clothes.
Yes, exactly. That's the perennial wisdom.
It's the perennial wisdom, and it's part of and we've lost so much of that. And watching my Danae friend John, how he relates to rain and water and the gratitude he feels for it, and the can I just go and turn on my tap and leave it running and then go do
don't think about it.
Well, I do my best, but I mean but I'm also aware that other people have so much to teach us, particularly people that's why these immigrant and refugee youth in our Stories of Arrival program, I long to have their voices heard, because some people who have at least some possibility of opening their hearts will say, well, I didn't know that child or that young person could feel so deeply, and they're not just whatever label is put on them by people who are politically wanting to gain some ground on people's fears. But
there is the essence of humanness and intervene
and their life in their place, to have them write about their food from their place, their mother cooking their food in their place, and that each place, like Wendell Berry said, there is no there's no desecrated places. They're just places where haven't been recognized as being sacred.
Exactly. Exactly. And recognizing that there are multiple realities, again, the pluriverse, right? So we don't, it's not for us to tell the story of anyone.
Right.
People have their own voices. But I want to kind of zero in
Sure.
in the what I think is the principle of your work, and this idea of finding or giving people the space
Uh-huh.
to find their creative spark that we are born with and we
Right.
lose in transit, is what I have learned from you, right? Which
Well,
is, right? So you invite us to move to where the creative delight, and I'm using your
uh-huh.
language, in
Uh-huh.
making
Uh-huh.
potions, that that delight, that creative delight we have as children,
Uh-huh.
right? So how, what I'm going to ask you though, as the person who has undergone
Uh-huh.
difficulties, as you were saying, a young child going, from hospitalization to hospitalization, and dealing with the reality
Uh-huh.
of a body that was calling. How do you not lose the creative delight amid somber days?
Oh boy. Oh, so you're asking me.
Yeah, at a personal.
I mean, you can't hear it now, but if I were to open my door up of my apartment,
Mm,
I would hear a fountain that's just outside my door
mm,
in the place where I live. And I
mm,
would hear the sound of water.
mm.
And it's actually fun because there's these muses, who are sort of holding up this bowl, but there's water coming through the spouts in the bowl, and then it falls down into the
Mm.
basin of the fountain, and so I would hear this flow of water, and I can actually hear it now. You can't hear it, I don't think, but I can hear it through the window, and it so seems like a simple thing. And how does that get me out of, like, dealing with severe pain, or if someone I know who is really hurting, but just allowing myself to be touched by that sound of water, is can make a difference to me in
Yeah.
how I'm hearing. And I actually do I have time? I have a little poem to share.
Yes, please, please. I think the other thing that you are highlighting that is so clearly threaded through your work is that this idea, this is how I interpret it, that you're telling us creativity is a non-striving thing. It's a non-striving joy.
Is listening to that water is
Yeah, exactly.
like becoming more in the moment.
Yeah,
So there's a poem I'd like to share that,
please.
working with a group of fifth graders, this is many, many, many years ago, but I had a bowl of words, and in this bowl were like all hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of words, and the children could pick the words out, and if they didn't like them, they could throw them back, they could change them. One time I love the music of Bach, and so I had Bach, which is like, why would I put Bach in this bowl? I had Bach in the bowl. So one day it came back, and some child had made an E and jammed between the B and the A. So the word had become beach, which has got to be a heck of a lot better than Bach for a poem.
Exactly.
So that
Creativity at work.
is very sweet, but also very creative. So anyway, this one child picked the word rivulet out of the bowl. Her name was Carolyn, and she came up to me and she said, "Mr. Fox, I don't know what this word means. Rivulet." So here, consider for a moment, Marianella, consider this, our listeners, consider this. You're meeting a word. She is meeting a word for the first time. Wow, that's something. So I didn't say, well, let's go to the dictionary and find out exactly what it means. I said to her, I said, well, a rivulet is a little stream of water that you could probably jump across. Because I wanted her to have a felt sense for this word. So she went back to her desk and she had these other words and she had chosen which words she'd use, and she could use her own words too. But she wrote this short poem called Friendship. And I'm relating this to your question about, sort of, it's like she was spontaneous about choosing this word. She was spontaneous in asking me the question, what does it mean? She went back to her desk. So it's called Friendship. And it begins, friendship is eternity, like two little rivulets that flow side by side forever. Between the two lies the vision of sweetly being, B-E-I-N-G. Between the two lies the vision of sweetly being. And when ashamed, they release and flow down different sides of the mountain. But then again, slowly but surely, you can see them side by side again. 11 years old.
And she's telling us this, the nature of life,
She's telling
basically.
us, see, this is so wonderful talking with you, because you got that immediately. And it's actually, it's actually a 7-line poem, so there can be a middle in it. And the middle line is, when ashamed they release. That's her middle line. So this first half, everything is sweet and roses, and then something happens, and the second time they flow down different stuff. But then again, and she had just met this word rivulet, and so so maybe what, Nancy, your sort of the bigger question about how do I approach adults, every adult I've ever met was at one time a child. I've never met an adult who started out that way. And I mean, I don't think I have, So I'm in my,
it's an easy portal, right?
in my heart, I'm thinking, well, so I actually bring children's poems into this work with adults, and that helps to disarm them a little bit, and their sense of adult responsibility, and having it all together, or not showing any vulnerability, can dissipate some, and then someone can begin. And it's the real thing is where that each person begins, and to be able to meet that with I mean, let's face it, and some of our listeners, we come with wounds about, like, I remember in second grade, I was told by the art teacher in second grade, I'm 7. Am I 7?
Something like that.
Something like that. She said, you'll never be an artist. It's almost a crime. It feels like a crime.
It is.
And
definitely.
And it feels like a kind of abuse. So adults often come with, injuries to their creative, their what they loved as children. Here comes the I forgot that Thursday, Marianella, is the gardener's day, so the leaf blower will be here any.
Oh
no,
that's part of the whole.
That's life.
That's life.
The
yeah, well, not sure, but we're not gonna go there.
No, we won't go there.
It's mom-made. But what, everything that you're saying here goes back to the point of that the joy of the creativity is a non-thriving thing, that the moment we start thriving and efforting, we get lost.
Yes.
We get lost, right? And children who had not been damaged by outside circumstances
Yes,
are
yes.
still in that place of joy and easiness.
Yes, and willingness to kind of,
Mhm,
try, or to,
mhm.
maybe the word try isn't quite the right word, but a willingness to, um, you know, they're not as defended, for sure.
Yeah, which brings me to your, you have offered the world three main practices
Uh-huh.
that I think are so helpful. And, I kind of, not kind, I can see how they connect
Uh-huh.
to the perennial wisdom that
Uh-huh.
that runs through all cultures. And I can think particularly in Buddhism, but
Uh-huh.
we don't need to talk about
Uh,
Buddhism. But your practices, this idea of the three offerings, the using the breath to infuse words with life, to seek the stillness to meet the essence of things, and
uh-huh.
then the listening as the path to intimacy, right? Which is the
Yeah.
interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh used to say, is this interconnectedness
Yes.
that runs through every single wise culture that
Uh-huh.
has not been damaged by colonization.
Right.
Holds that, right?
Mm.
So I think that's what you have been able to see, and you are using these three reminders,
Uh-huh.
right,
That,
to ask us.
yes. I
Things
just want to, I'm very moved, Marinello, that because what she's talking about is a section in the early part of Finding What You Didn't Lose,
Mhm.
about stillness, listening, and breathing.
Yeah.
And it just is, I must say this, that your attentiveness, your close reading of something is quite, it feels like a real gift. So I just
Hmm.
want to acknowledge you for that. And
Well, I needed to learn how to work with people, and you taught me. I mean, you and many other people.
yeah. Well, so yeah, and we all are breathing, and listening is such, what a treasure it is to feel like someone has really listened to you.
Mhm.
And then to be, maybe, when I talked about earlier about the water flowing, I'm also aware of all, uh-oh, 1 second. Okay, no, I'll just leave that door. My door just sort of popped open a little bit. Um,
Okay.
um, that stillness, in order to hear and listen to the water, I need to find a little bit of stillness in myself.
Yes.
So they are they're sort of intertwined, they're
Yes.
together.
Yeah.
Um,
John, do you have your poem about when someone listens to you? Do you have that
yeah,
available?
sure. So when I was starting my training in poetry therapy back in the mid 80s, working with a wonderful pioneer in the field, Joy Sheeman, at El Camino Hospital on the mental health wing, I really asked myself this question: what am I here to learn? What do I need to learn? And so this poem arrived. And so it's called When Someone Deeply Listens to You.
Mhm.
When someone deeply listens to you, it is like holding out a dented cup you've had since childhood and watching it fill up with cold, fresh water. When it balances on top of the brim, you are understood. When it overflows and touches your skin, you are loved. When someone deeply listens to you, the room where you stay starts a new life. and the place where you wrote your first poem begins to glow in your mind's eye. It is as if gold has been discovered. When someone deeply listens to you, your bare feet are on the earth, and the beloved land that seemed distant is now at home within you. When someone deeply listens to you, your bare feet are on the earth, and a beloved land that seemed distant is now at home within you.
Mm.
Fellas, it was, have a good pause. Felt like it was a gift, you know. And I've known that poem for a very, very long time, since 1985. And yet, even right now, I'm feeling so grateful to it for helping me to understand what, you know, what I, in fact, did need to learn. And I wanted to learn how to listen.
Yeah, and sympathizes that also the idea that in order for there to be a listener, there has to be that counterpart, right? Like everything has an opposite that complements. And yeah, so in going back to your emphasis on intimate listening, that I think, you know, it's embodied, it reveals itself through the interrelationality between everything that is. But it, you know, you specifically talk to us about the perception aspect, the thought, feelings, sensations, intuition, and spirits. And that's perennial wisdom, right? Like what you do is punctuate for us. Pay attention to this. This has been proven.
Yeah.
So you leave these reminders. Now, in a world where we are functioning behind screens and through cyber connections, my question, and I have asked this question to many people, are we losing grounds in terms of the intimacy of listening? When I think about social media and all the, are we losing?
That's a important subject. And although I'm grateful that we can talk this way, and I feel that does have benefit. It's you know, we've had a wonderful conversation,
right?
And so, and yet, you know, I feel that there's nothing to compare to being in a room or a place, it could be outside, with other people in a circle where we're aware of the person to my left, my person to my right. I mean, I like to talk about elbows and knees, you know.
Yes.
And, I mean,
and scent
and speaking, and you know, and a sense of the vibration of a person. And yet, you know, I have to say that I have, like, this may shock people, but this is my phone.
Oh, you have a foldy.
I have a little flip phone, you know.
You have a flip phone.
and that's a choice. And I don't want to get too political here or too, you know, corporate, but
you have my permission.
I remember, you know, going to the doctor's office. I need to get my blood drawn to go see the doctor. And so I went there, and there was a long line, you know, and the thing with my leg is it ended up being amputated. And so sometimes standing in long lines is not my favorite thing to do. So there was a woman behind me, and she was looking at her phone and tapping on it. And I said, "Ma'am, would you hold my place in line? I'd like to go sit down over here." And and she was, glad to do that. So I went and sat down and I looked at this long line, probably about 17 people, and every single person was looking at their phone. No one was saying, well, hi, how you doing? Or, or just, I mean, I know it's like would keep my attention, but
it's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot of benefit that comes from it.
Yeah.
I know that, but
Yeah.
but to answer your question, I feel that technology is not necessarily helping us to learn how to listen intimately
Yeah.
to each other.
Mhm.
And I feel we need to find opportunities, where we can practice it, and maybe that's why we love this work with Writing to Heal, because people are, whether it's online or in person, and now that we're getting, because there was a real reason for the lack of being in person.
Right. It was justified. But I think, you're saying that even when we do online, right, we are summoning people. We're inviting them to touch into their senses and all these elements, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And some maybe inner voice, some kind of sort of unspoken thing. So again, I mean, there's benefit to it, but
it's beautiful. So we are at the top of the hour and have to stop. But is there anything that I didn't ask that you want our audience to know, either about yourself, your work, or about the institute?
Do I have like 2 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I'm going to just say a thoughtful conversation like this, of meaningful with feeling and perception, is so enjoyable. And so, that's one thing I want to say before we part. So, the Institute does fund projects of people working with, a multi-verse use, people, and all kinds, working with people with immigrant and refugees, people with Parkinson's, women in prison, and finding that valuing that everybody has a creative voice. So we're a nonprofit, so things don't happen just by magic, there is some magic, but if people want to find out more, they can go. We have a new website that's being launched, poeticmedicine.org, or a Facebook page, Poetic Medicine Facebook, I guess, would get you there. And if people feel like this is something they would like to support, and whether just by your good word or perhaps financially, I'm, as the CEO of the Institute, I'm welcoming that.
Beautiful.
But I also just want to encourage people. And Marinella mentioned a couple of books I've written, but that's not the only story, and she has things to share. And I would say, give a spark to your own curiosity, and find what your heart will resonate with. And so that's my kind of closing.
Beautiful.
To say.
Thank you so much. I feel like we could have spent the whole day here, but maybe we'll come back to a different conversation.
I think there's other conversations.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to What a Word is Worth. You can access today's episode at Anchor and other platforms, and also the video, you can access it on YouTube. And if you are interested, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And also, if you found our program beneficial, leave us a review. I am with you in love and compassion always, always.